Welcome back to talkSPORT USA, our very own dedicated NFL YouTube channel with myself, Will Varney, here in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The sun's shining outside at the Chiefs media availability today, building up to the big Week 1 game between the Los Angeles Chargers and, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs. Absolute pleasure today to give me some insight into the Kansas City Chiefs looking to get over that hump of that Super Bowl hangover potentially from February. Pleasure to say Jesse Newell from The Athletic joins me, Chiefs reporter. Jesse, how are you, my man? Welcome to Brazil.
I appreciate it. Yeah, doing okay on 2 hours of sleep and the plane kind of flopped over, but we'll power through here and get to tomorrow.
Look, I wanted to start by, I mentioned there the hangover or this potential narrative of a hangover, but this is a team that knows how to win, has done it for years. What you've seen so far from training camp, from OTAs, all of the build up to this season, what are the vibes amongst this team reflecting on that Super Bowl defeat that was comprehensive in the end?
Yeah, it's funny to talk about the Chiefs' problems, right? The Chiefs' problems are that they've lost one playoff game in 3 years. You know, they've made the Super Bowl 3 years, but 3 years in a row, but only won 2 of those. So it is interesting because you talk about some of these guys out here at practice right now from the 2022 draft class. They've been with the Chiefs 4 years, and their first 2 years, they didn't know anything but winning in the playoffs. And so, yeah, the Chiefs are motivated by a loss, obviously, and not only just by the loss, but they were embarrassed in the Super Bowl. They were down 34-0 to the Eagles before, eventually getting some points back in that game, but not nearly enough. So I think it especially kind of, when you look at it, guys like Patrick Mahomes, it really allows them to focus in on some of the weaknesses they have. And I know he's been talking about, and his teammates have been talking about holding him accountable, throw the ball downfield more and getting more deep shots and doing some of the things they didn't do a year ago. And he seemed really motivated ever since then. I know the Chiefs just had an ESPN documentary come out on them, and he talked about that being one of the most crushing losses of his career because they were chasing history. So I do think there's a sense of motivation for the Chiefs with this loss after winning 2 straight Super Bowls, even as silly as that sounds, just because they're not used to this, and those sorts of things are things that can motivate you for the next year.
I think that's the thing. Everyone sees the Chiefs. They are this superpower, 9 consecutive AFC West titles. This is an incredibly competitive division, especially when you look at this season, what Sean Payton, what he's building with the Broncos, this increased confidence in the Chargers, and then the Raiders bringing in Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. What do you make of the competitiveness of this division, and will it be even harder for the Chiefs to make it 10, do you think, come this season?
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, you look at the Vegas odds out there, the betting odds out there, and the Chiefs aren't that big of a favorite in this division. You talked about it. They've won it 9 years in a row, and the reason for that is exactly what you said. If you want to start with 2 things to start a franchise, you want to start with a coach and a quarterback. A coach and a quarterback. And you talk about all those teams, they've got it. And, the Chiefs are going to start with the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, a coach and a quarterback. The Raiders obviously made some good adjustments in the offseason, bringing in Geno Smith, getting Pete Carroll, who could be a future Hall of Fame coach as well. And so, yeah, I mean, the AFC West is catching up to the Chiefs. And if you look back at the Chiefs last year, they went 15-1 before they sat their starters in the final regular season game to go to 15-2. But there were a lot of games against those AFC West opponents where they hit a field goal off the upright to win the game. They had a blocked field goal at the end of the game to win a game. They had a guy an opposing player fumble the ball in field goal range to win a game. So there were some breaks that went their way. You could see them taking a step back with maybe not all those lucky things going right, plus the rest of this division, starting to catch up. Are the Chiefs still the favorite? Yes, absolutely. But the margin for error is pretty slim, and that's because these other teams have done good things in the offseason, and they do have those 2 things you really need to be competitive. A coach and a quarterback. All 3 of those teams have it besides the Chiefs.
And clearly one of the things the Chiefs focused on was the offensive line coming into this season. They knew that Joe Tooney's traded to the Bears. They knew that there was this weak spot on left tackle that they had to fill, and that's ultimately, it felt like that was the demise in the Super Bowl, the fact that Mike Caliendo at left guard just couldn't deal with Jalen Carter and that interior pass rush of the Eagles. So looking at the business they've done, they bring in Jalen Moore, but there's questions now whether Jalen Moore even starts when you look at the fact that you're going to have Josh Simmons, and maybe firstly Josh Simmons, selected 32nd overall, but there's a lot of conversations that if he doesn't have the patella tendon injury, he could have easily gone in the top 10, top 15. What have you seen from him from camp, and why should Chiefs fans be really excited about him?
Yeah, just wrote a feature on him earlier this week at The Athletic and kind of dove into the Chiefs and what they saw from him in the pre-draft process, and then what they've seen from him since. And what they've seen from him since they've gotten him in the building has been ultra competitiveness. And what they missed a year ago, I think, at left tackle, part of it was just a confidence level to be like, hey, I can move on from that last play. I don't have to let that affect me the rest of the game. And so far, I was talking with Brett Veach about this, the Chiefs general manager, saying, hey, when he's at practice and training camp practice, when he saw Josh Simmons get beat, he heard 3 words from him: let's go again, let's go again. He wanted to get back out there and show, hey, that's not me. I want to show what me really is. And so they loved him. He had the knee injury you talked about in college last year that dropped him in the draft all the way to 32, but he rehabbed the heck out of that thing. He was with every single practice for the Chiefs. They were hoping to get him back in training camp in July. He was out in practices in May, and so he beat every timeline. They love him, and they think they have really high expectations for him as a rookie. So potentially solidifying that left side of the line. You mentioned Jalen Moore. He's a backup right now, but that's a good news for the Chiefs, because having 2 potential guys at left tackle better than a guy you had a year ago is better than having 0 guys, and so they'll have that. And then Kingsley Suamata'i at left guard. He's one of those guys that went through the left tackle rotation a year ago before getting benched. He's super athletic, just needs to have his confidence up, and he can get out in the run game. He's a guy that can get out and kind of steamroll you in that potential way. Some struggles with pass blocking in the preseason, but we'll see if he can overcome those, and again, keep his confidence up. With Josh Simmons next to him, that should be a little bit easier.
From the rookie to the veteran, I have to ask you about Travis Kelce, in terms of, there was a lot of conversations at the end of last year. Was that going to be his swan song? Clearly not. He's back. Maybe this could be his final year. What have you seen from Travis? Because last year, in terms of everything that we've seen from him, a future Hall of Famer, it was a down year for him. Do you believe that there could be some upside to him? Obviously, that relationship with Patrick Mahomes, so important in this offense. What do you expect to see from Travis?
You said that relationship with, and then went to Patrick Mahomes. Yes, I thought you were going somewhere different with that, Will. I thought you were going somewhere different. Lots of relationships for Travis Kelce to talk about nowadays. He came in camp noticeably thinner. He looks in better shape, and so that's something to consider for this. And we saw him in the preseason. He caught one pass, kind of made a juke move, and broke a tackle. He broke only 2 tackles all of last regular season. So that's the type of thing. He used to be elite with that. The best in the NFL when it came to tight ends breaking tackles. We didn't see that as much a year ago, and again, maybe because of the weight, maybe just because of age, and we don't see tight ends at his age. It's his age 36 season. We don't see guys have that sort of production that he's had. It's very, very rare. And in fact, last season, when he was age 35 season, only 2 tight ends in NFL history had more than 500 yards before he did last year, and he had like 900, 950. So he's still producing out there, still kind of battling Father Time. But I would say the hope going this year is motivation again. Didn't want to go out, lose in the Super Bowl, and come back and not have it be one of his, a year that was better than last year. And then, like I said, just being in better shape. Is that going to allow him to break tackles and do the sorts of things we saw him do early on in his career? That's kind of the big question going into this season.
Obviously, an engagement as well.
There's the engagement. There's the relationship.
Look, I had to mention it, Jesse. Goodness me, I had to slide that right in there. But also, the production of this offense overall, I wanted to get your thoughts on, because obviously, Rashee Rice is going to miss the first 6 games of the season with a suspension. So there was a lot of questions about Xavier Worthy last year coming in and maybe his role in this offense. And do we feel like, where's he best suited, Xavier Worthy? Because I think there was a lot of thoughts that he's going to be this deep ball kind of guy, and they're just going to allow the likes of Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown to be that underneath type of receiver. Where do you see this figuring out in these first 6 weeks of the season, and how big a loss was Rashee Rice last season, but also is he for this first 6 games of this season? Yeah,
the Xavier Worthy question is going on. The Chiefs do a great job of putting their playmakers in positions to accentuate their strengths, and so they envisioned Xavier Worthy being the deep guy, but then Rashee Rice went down with the injury, so they said, hey, he's still one of the best players, so they put him in short routes. They let him use his speed to kind of get some of those shorter yards last year. I think they're going to transition and do that again this year, the first 6 games without Rashee Rice, because he is one of their best playmakers, and he showed he could do that sort of thing a season ago. As far as Rashee Rice goes, he is their wide receiver 1 when he's in. I mean, he's looked amazing in training camp. He has the explosion. He has the burst back after that season-ending knee injury, and so when he gets back, it's going to be a huge boost to the Chiefs offense, and it's going to be a lot of what their hopes are pinned on this year with Patrick Mahomes and the offense potentially being better than it was a season ago. It's just, they got to wait for it again. And we know last year they waited the whole season to get Rashee Rice back, thought they might have at the beginning of the season, going to play 6 more games after the suspension. But when he is back in there, this Chiefs offense should have as many playmakers as Patrick Mahomes has had in quite some time.
And when you have Patrick Mahomes, you have an elite quarterback, one of the best, if not the best, in history. In terms of Patrick Mahomes, there was a lot of narrative last season. Chiefs looking to do the 3-peat. Where would he rank in terms of him and Tom Brady, right? There were these conversations. Feels like they've sort of quietened down ever since the Super Bowl. Do you feel like he's maybe using that as fuel? Does he need fuel when you've had a career so far that Patrick Mahomes has had in the National Football League?
It's funny. sometimes in Kansas City it's called petty Pat. You know, he finds these ways, finds these things on social media, and it's funny. His trainer sometimes tweets them out, I think, to make sure that Patrick Mahomes sees them as well. But yeah, you can take motivation for whatever you need, and sometimes when you're at the very top of your game, you do need something to go out there and say, hey, this is what the league thinks of me, or somebody thinks of me. And you know, there's been a lot of people, it happens every year, but especially this year, there's a lot of people saying the Chiefs dynasty's over, that the Chiefs are not going to win the division. And if you want to find that stuff, you can. And I think Patrick Mahomes goes out of his way to make sure that he does find that stuff, because he wants to be motivated, he wants to be fueled by that fire. And in the past, he's done it as well. There's been times, you know, like this year, he got ranked, I think, the 5th best player by his peers in the NFL.
Yep.
And in the past, when he did that and played against Lamar Jackson, he was like counting on his fingers what number he was when he wasn't number one. You know, maybe you'll see that again this year. But I think, yes, the Chiefs take every opportunity they can to draw motivation wherever they can. And Patrick Mahomes is definitely at the top of that list, because if that's what fuels you and that's what gets you going and allows you to be one of the best quarterbacks to ever live, then I would continue doing that as well.
Final couple from me, Jesse. Just wanted to touch on the defense quickly. Look, it doesn't feel like there's been many big changes. Obviously, they drafted defensive tackle second round in Norman Lott. Justin Reed, though, leaves in free agency. What can we expect from this defense this year under Steve Spagnuolo, who arguably is probably going to be a Hall of Famer, even assistant coach, right?
As an assistant coach route, which is much harder
rare
to do, absolutely. I think you mentioned what they want to see and what they like is the continuity. And so much of what Steve Spagnuolo does on defense is he makes things complicated, and he gets guys in there that are very smart. And so one of the guys that he brought back in free agency that's a big deal is Nick Bolton, their middle linebacker. He makes the calls for them. He makes sure they're in the right call. If something is going to be messed up, he can communicate that from the front end of the defense to the back end of the defense. And so they got him back. They obviously have Chris Jones back. And then they're going to need some other guys, some younger guys to step up. You mentioned Norman Lott. He's been battling an ankle injury in training camp, but he's a second-round pick. They have high expectations for him as a potential pass rush specialist next to Chris Jones. And then on the back end, Jaden Hicks is a second-year player who played some in the rotation as a safety last year, but they're going to need a lot more from him exactly because of what you said. Justin Reed, a big-time leader for them and a big-time producer for them, moved on and signed with the New Orleans Saints. So I think what their hope is that they have a bunch of guys in the building who know the system and know the playbook and know Steve Spagnuolo. And when Steve Spagnuolo has that, he can really open up the Cheesecake Factory playbook and be able to kind of confuse guys out there. So I think that's what they want to create this year, and they like the guys they have, and that's why they brought so many of them back for this 2025 season.
So finally from me, looking ahead to tomorrow, week 1, taking on a divisional rival in the Chargers. It's a Chargers home game, but look, we're in Sao Paulo, Brazil, right? Anything can happen, and it's also week 1, so you can't read too much into it. A team like the Chiefs, it's always wait till January, get to the playoffs, and then we'll see how it goes. But what are you looking out for in particular tomorrow during the game? What are you going to be keeping an eye on? Is it the offensive line? Is it something in the defense? What are your eyes going to be focused on?
Well, and it's still an important game. It's a divisional game, like we talked about. I mean, the AFC West is going to be competitive, and you can't drop too many if you want to think that you're going to compete with teams like the Broncos and the Chargers and even the upstart Raiders in this division. It's going to be tough going, and part of what Andy Reid's done so well throughout his career is with the Chiefs is he wins AFC West games. I mean, they've been great in September, and they've been great in the AFC West, and that's really what's led them to this really long streak. But the biggest thing I'll be looking for is Patrick Mahomes. Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator, talked about this when I asked him the other day about they have been one of the least explosive passing games here. And it's not the Patrick Mahomes you think about from 3 or 4 years ago with Tyreek Hill, where they're throwing bombs down the field. He last year had the shortest average depth of target of his entire career. And some of that's personnel driven, some of that's because they didn't have the good blocking, some of that's because they didn't have the downfield threats. But he has made a concerted effort this year to throw the ball deeper. And now, Matt Nagy said, in meeting rooms, they have acronyms, they have words they tell him when he doesn't throw the ball deep to remind him, throw the ball deep. And so I'm interested to see how this offense can become more explosive, and for this particular, very specific thing that Patrick Mahomes is working on, how that comes to fruition in the first game. We saw some of in the preseason. His average depth of target last year was 6.3 yards per pass. In the preseason, it was over 11. So almost double how far he's throwing the ball down the field. This is a very big thing that they're looking to do this year. It's a very big emphasis for Patrick Mahomes. I'm interested to see how that plays out against the Chargers defense that was pretty good a year ago, but struggled some against the deep pass.
Jesse, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Enjoy your time in Sao Paulo. Really appreciate your time for talkSPORT.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.